Hi, welcome to Here to There, hosted by Carolyn Taketa, former attorney, current small groups pastor, and life coach. Through monthly conversations with pastors, authors, and guests, we hope to stir your thoughts and encourage you to move from where you are to where you want to be, in your personal life, in your leadership, or in your ministry.
All right, welcome to Group Talk. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Carolyn Taketa, your host and the Executive Director of Small Groups at Calvary Community Church in Westlake Village, California. Well, there's been a lot of attention in recent years about the difference between introverts and extroverts. We recognize that our natural temperament, whether it's through DNA or the way we were raised or just our circumstances, has become very relevant in all spheres of our lives and ministry, especially in a relational ministry like small groups. It affects how we lead as ministry team leaders, how we recruit new leaders, assumptions we make about members, how we connect people, how we develop and coach them. It just affects every aspect of our leadership. So we're going to explore this topic more and talk about the strengths and weaknesses and how we can better reach both types of temperaments. So with me on the program today are two guests, Amy Jackson and Tom Kang, who identify more strongly with either an introversion or an extroversion personality, and we'll let you guess which one is which. I think it'll be pretty obvious pretty soon.
Very difficult.
Amy Jackson is the managing editor of Christianity Today and oversees the website smallgroups.com and christianbiblestudies.com and Gifted for Leadership. She served as a small groups minister and has a master's in Christian formation and ministry from Wheaton College. If you're not familiar with smallgroups.com, you need to be, because it has 2.5 million page views, which is amazing, Amy.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, and it was the first resource I looked at when I started small groups ministry 10 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing, and I pretty much hung out on that website like every day. And it's so, and I hear that a lot from people. So that's a great website, and she's kind of been involved with all kind of shaping that along the way. So it's a great resource. Tom Kang is the men's pastor at Saddleback Church. I'm in Lake Forest, California, and he provides point leadership for the men at the Central Campus. He was originally born and raised in New Jersey, and most recently he served as the teaching pastor and campus pastor at Liquid Church, which is one of the fastest growing churches in America. But he's been at Saddleback for a little over a year, and he has a YouTube channel called...
I think it's called the Manly Minute.
Yeah, there you go. That's all you need to know about Tom. And he was highly recommended for this particular topic in this program. Soon you shall see why. Thank you guys for being on the program.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. So awesome.
All right, so to start off our leaders to guess which one is which, let me ask you both a question. So Amy and Tom, you enter a party, and there's lots of people you've never met and you do not know, and it's a large party. Your first reaction, Amy, what is your first reaction when you walk in?
Hug the wall and observe and try to find someone that looks friendly.
And Tom, what would be your first reaction?
So we have a small dog. It's a cockapoo that whenever guests come into our house, this dog just like runs up to the guest and like starts licking and biting and just all over the place. That would probably be my reaction at a party.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I think it's clear. Tom is on the more extroversion scale of things, and Amy's more on the introversion scale of things.
Yes.
So that kind of gives you a feel. Basically, okay, so here's part two of the question. Okay, now you've been at this party for 8 hours.
8 hours? That's a long party.
A long party.
Wow.
Okay. Right.
8 hours.
Pretend it's like a conference.
All right.
For 8 hours,
Okay.
you're with people for 8 hours.
Yes.
Now, at the end of the day, how do you feel?
Honestly, I feel spent because I've exerted all this energy on people. So yeah,
You can't party for another 8 hours?
It depends on the people. I can go for a round two though, for sure.
You probably could. All right, Amy, could you go for round two?
Yeah, I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
Right.
Although, it kind of depends on the people, which is on the point. So we used to think back in the old days that introversion and extroversion was about being shy. And then there was some kind of labeling and value judgments put on that. But research has now shown us it's not about shyness or not liking people. It's really about how we get our energy, how we get recharged. Introverts tend to recharge by spending time alone in solitude or with just one-on-one. And they lose energy when they're around lots of people for long periods of time, especially large crowds. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from people. They find their energy sapped when they spend too much time alone. So, Tom, here's the confession. When I asked Steve Gladen, who on his team is an extrovert, because I needed an extrovert for this topic.
Oh, my word.
Him, as well as, I think 4 or 5 people on the Saddleback Small Groups team said, oh, Tom, no question.
I don't know what to even say there. I don't know what to think of.
So thank you. So you can say thank you. So using that as kind of our framework, that's about how we gain energy. What about some other attributes? Maybe we could start with you with introverts. What are some other attributes that we associate with each of these temperaments?
The good things we associate with them?
Yes. Good or bad?
I think introverts definitely need to have that alone time to recharge, whether that's reading with a book or just going to bed, or like you said, the one-on-one. I think introverts really excel at some of the one-on-one or one-on-two kind of situations. Small talk is painful for introverts, and so they kind of want to cut through that fluff and get into the meaty stuff. So, but unfortunately, a lot of times what we think of with introverts is shyness, like you said, or antisocial, or that they don't like people.
Well, they're awkward.
They're awkward, which some of us are, but
not you. You're not.
But I think introverts really love people and they want to go deep with them. And sometimes it just takes that extra little push, but it also really drains them to really love people in that way. So they also need that time to recharge.
What about for extroverts, you think, Tom?
We're talking basically stereotypes.
Yeah, you could go stereotypes.
Yeah.
If you have medical research, feel free to throw that in.
Right. Well, Amy, as you were saying that, sometimes introverts can be kind of seen as awkward. There are a lot of awkward extroverts as well.
This is true.
So true.
That's kind of where my mind wandered off to.
Yeah.
But I think extroverts kind of have a reputation of being maybe like the life of the party.
Yes.
Just, loud. That is one of the characteristics. You can't miss them, whether it's visually or audibly or, whatever. That they're in the room kind of a thing. They command attention and whatnot, for better or for worse. So I think, extroverts kind of have that reputation.
And the presence. Yeah. So we talked earlier before the broadcast about how it's really not an either or. And we do a disservice if we even categorize ourselves or our children or, our small group leaders as either or.
Sure.
And it's actually more of a spectrum. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Amen. Now you're preaching, sister. One of the things that we were kind of talking about earlier was how just I definitely am, I guess, as some of my friends were saying, an extreme extrovert at times. But the honest reality is there is a huge part of me that's also introverted as well.
They just don't see that because you're alone.
They don't see that because whenever we see each other, we're like in this group setting or ministry setting per se. A lot of times I'll find my strength in solitude and in silence. And I kind of store up that energy, so to speak, so that I spend it on people.
And Amy, I've seen you at conferences. Yeah. You're great at working a room. You're not hugging the walls at all.
Right.
You move from little circles here and there, and you could not tell that you would rather be curled up with a book. And I think, is that something you developed as over the course of time for your work and for your ministry?
Yeah, I think that is. I used to work at a church, and I can still remember I would give a sermon, and then you're standing at the end in the receiving line, if you will, and I would have to take a 3-hour nap after that. I was so exhausted by the experience of talking to so many people, and so I think I have a good friend that is an introvert, and she gave me this great advice of just be present with the person you're with. The one person you're with, and that put it into introvert transfer me. And so there's still, I like to move around and meet people, but I feel like if I can just focus on the one person I'm talking to, it's much less draining than kind of standing in the circle with 12 people.
Sure.
That's true. So now there's this term called an ambivert, which is basically someone who's equally one and the other. But most people probably have a slight proclivity towards one. Mine's slightly towards introvert, and my friends, Tom would say I was an extrovert as well.
Right.
But they just don't know me.
So misunderstood.
But it's actually, I think, the research has shown that if you can bring out different attributes of that in any given situation, you're actually a stronger leader. So you want ambiverts for your leaders. But American culture has a strong preference for extroverts. That's why our education system rewards the ones who are raising their hand and talking.
Sure.
Corporate culture rewards the schmoozer. Politics, we don't even need to go there. And even church world and small groups, though, rewards the talkers. So, okay, let's go to leaders. Do you think we have this assumption that extroverted make better leaders, small group leaders? Has that been your experience? Are extroverts better small group leaders?
That's a great question. I would say, especially in the small group ministry world, it may appear so from kind of outside gazing in. But speaking as an extrovert, I know that here's the God's honest truth, and I may get fired for this. I'm not a great small group leader because I tend to dominate the conversation. Do you know what I'm saying? And a really good small group has the conversation bouncing from one person to another.
That's an excellent point.
You know what I mean? And so, I've had to deliberately, very purposefully kind of tone it down, throw a question out there.
And not answer.
Be comfortable with a little bit of what I consider awkward silence if it's quiet for more than 3 seconds, which is not a big deal at all.
Right. But you want to rescue otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And so, does that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
But initially, don't you think we kind of are drawn? For recruiting leaders, I know I do this. I'm so drawn towards, oh my gosh, an extrovert tends to be more of a gatherer of people. So it seems like they would make better leaders, but I haven't always found that to be the case.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, there's that natural inclination that we think, the extroverts, they gather people together. They can work the crowd. That first night isn't going to be awkward because they're going to talk to everybody. Everyone's going to feel like they're seen and heard.
Right.
But what I've actually found is the extroverts are the ones I have to coach and say, okay, 30-second rule. Ask the question, wait 30 seconds, time yourself if you need to.
Yes.
Where, the introverts are a little more okay with that silence and that tension, and they let other people process.
Yeah.
And they tend to be better listeners.
Yeah.
I'm married to one. He's a good listener.
Oh, that's good.
It's funny you use the word marriage there because I'm thinking in my head, in the small group ministry world, I think extroverts are the ones that you date, introverts are the ones that you marry. You know what I mean? It's just there's some kind of combination in there. So
yeah, and I think that gets to something too because depending on your role within ministry, I mean, sometimes you really need more of that extroversion. I mean, to be the person that's out there and getting people to get involved versus the person that's really going to do this just deep discipleship and let's meet and really get invested.
Staying power is
or
going to
coaching
be there.
sometimes that really going deep. Yeah. So,
but that would be assuming that the introverted leader is aware of that and is pushing themselves beyond their comfort level, right? So we did this quick survey at the Small Group Network lobby a while ago, and we had 110 small group pastors and directors, and we did an online survey of who's an introvert and extrovert. It was a very simple question, and we had 55% were introverts and 45 were extroverts.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
So it surprises you. Why?
Yes.
Why?
Because again, you're in an environment, you're with all these leaders.
These are small group point leaders.
Small group point leaders, yeah. And to find that the majority are actually introverted, that's surprising.
Crazy.
I think it surprised all of us, and then then the introverts felt better.
Yes, we were like, we're not alone here. There's other people.
I have heard that with senior pastors too, that they actually are a lot more introverted.
Yes.
And rather than extroverted, even though they have a public presence.
Right.
Looks more engaging.
Right. And I think it's because for the majority of folks, when they see a pastor, they'll see him, behind a pulpit or preaching. It's very, he's in the public eye. And when he's in the public eye, he's quote unquote on, as it were.
Right.
And, they're going to see their pastor when he or she is on. And so the assumption is they're always on.
Absolutely.
They're not necessarily going to be. I know we started to touch on the weaknesses, potentially the dark side for the temperament. And Tom, you mentioned over talking tends to be more of an extroverted trait, or maybe attention seeking.
Right.
What are some other potential dark side for either introverts or extroverts?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously with the introvert, I mean, a small group ministry is draining. It's just draining in general. So, and I think no matter how you go about it, it's going to be, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of heavy stuff.
So you should take a nap first.
Yeah.
Before and after.
But I think there is that tendency, like, especially with introverts, like I get my comfort people. If I've gone out of my comfort zone to really invest in my small group, like it's a little scary to invite new people that might mess with that, or having to start over with a new group or with new people, or even just being especially welcoming to new leaders, because it's like, oh man, I got to start over with these relationships. And I'm always glad I did, but there is that internal, like, I have to push myself a little bit to do that. And that, that's the job. So it's hard when that's
a challenge. Yeah. Yeah. So it seems easier to lead people that are more similar to ourselves. Would you agree? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you click more with people that are kind of along that spectrum. So what advice would you give as a leader on how you would communicate or lead? Like, let's start with introverted people better. So say you're the small group leader. There's introverted people in your small group. And you're coaching the small group leader to say, okay, how do you better reach them? Do you just let them sit and be quiet and let them be in their peace? Do you kind of poke and push them to share? What would you say? What's the best way to lead introvert small group members?
Are we speaking from an extroverted leader's perspective or an introverted leader's perspective?
Or you're an extroverted leader.
Okay. So
leading
you're an
someone opposite.
Right. So you're an extroverted leader with a small group full of introverts.
Yes.
So how
would you coach that leader?
how would I coach that extroverted leader
to lead those people?
To lead those people, yeah. Well, speaking from personal experience, right? Because I've been in those situations. We were talking a little bit about it before. It's just there has to be a level of self-awareness, right? There has to be a level of okay, I understand the way that I'm coming across this group, and that's key 101 leadership.
Sure.
And understanding who your audience is, or who in this case your group is, and really encouraging them to be themselves. We're not trying to be inauthentic here in any way. We want you to be yourselves. We want you to feel comfortable. And a lot of these, for a lot of times, introverts, when they feel comfortable, as you were saying, Amy, they will speak up. They have a lot of things to say, a lot of care, a lot of heart. And so I think it's about creating that environment where this is safe. You can be yourself. I'm going to throw some things out there, and I'm going to be sit back and be comfortable, just as you may be uncomfortable as an introvert bringing things up. I need to kind of step into that uncomfortability, so to speak, as an extrovert, and be okay with a little bit of that tension of silence.
Do you think it takes longer for introverts to feel safe and comfortable enough to speak?
That's a great question, because I know some introverts that are really not shy. They just they're waiting for the opportunity to speak. And I think like they just need a little extra time to process. So sometimes all it takes is just saying, hey, it looks like you've got some thoughts there. Can you share? And prompting it. Yep. The other thing that I always try to tell extroverted leaders in that situation too is just watch what your messages are, because I feel like so many of them are unintentional. But when the extroverted leader starts feeling nervous because it's been silent for 10 seconds, so they start going, "Come on, guys, didn't this mean anything to you?" And it's kind of short circuiting what's going on with them. And so I think just be mindful of what kind of messages we might be sending.
Okay, what about the flip? Now you have an extroverted leader that you're coaching with introverted leader you're coaching that has a room of extroverts. Yeah. How do you coach that person to lead that group? You pray for
that person.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I think really one of the biggest things is that I've had to do for myself in thinking of that situation is I want to sit back and observe and process. I'm not going to jump in before I feel like I'm ready. But if I'm in a group of extroverts, I have to jump in before I'm ready.
That's true.
I have to get into the conversation. Otherwise, I'll be silent the entire time.
And as the leader, that will be tough.
Exactly. And so you can't really guide and facilitate much of the discussion if you never say a word.
Right.
And so I think encouraging them to kind of like, you've got this, jump in and even if you're not 100% processed yet, get in there and see what you can add to that conversation.
Yeah, I love that, Amy, because you're speaking about encouragement there. You're really encouraging that introverted leader. And what I would share with the introverted leader, and I've done this before, is listen, you may be in a room full of extroverts, but when you do speak up and when you do lead, the extroverted person notices that,
Yes.
and that's like a huge spark.
Sure.
And so they're listening. And I've been in situations, just even personally, like I married a huge introvert. My wife is like a total 100% introvert. But when she speaks up, I totally listen, right? And I'm thinking, that's on a personal level, on a quote unquote professional or pastoral level. I'm just thinking about all my managers in the past, or all my bosses in the past. And it's so funny the way that God kind of does pairing, right? Like the majority of my leaders in the past were introverted men.
Wow.
And I would just, there's so much wisdom there, and I would just gravitate to that, and I would just love when they would speak up, because like it would just, I would cling to that. So I would encourage that introverted leader that way. Hey, speak up. It's people are listening when you do that.
Right. I think that makes a big difference. So one of the key things I try to communicate to both types is really don't make assumptions based on how much someone is talking or not talking.
Right.
Kind of glean that. One area this comes up in a very practical way is in prayer, group prayer. Now, when we do the typical popcorn style group prayer, what usually happens?
All the extroverts, because they feel uncomfortable with that awkward silence. So, dear Lord, bless this food.
Oh my goodness.
That's my neighbor's cat.
Yes. Yeah. Anything but silence. Right.
So I think even just something like that, to be intentional, knowing your own, like you said, Tom, self-awareness, kind of knowing what that is, to kind of design that particular time, whether it's the study or the prayer time, with your group in mind. And so one thing one of my leaders did with an introverted person was they were comfortable, but they still were kind of a little hesitant. They tend to think they don't have as much to offer. So this is kind of this false idea. So he would just give her a heads up and say, hey, I'd love for you to pray at the end of this.
Yes.
I'd love to hear you pray. And so would you mind? And then gave her an hour and a half basically to kind of go, okay. And then she felt affirmed. And it just was so much more comfortable. A popcorn prayer she would never do.
Right.
She's not going to jump in and interrupt on this.
Sure.
So just kind of priming the pump and giving them a heads up seemed to help. So things like that, there's just little tricks where you can kind of help both. All right. So this last area I want us to cover quickly is when we connect people into small groups. So I just call that broadly our connection strategy, whether that's a campaign, whether it's a group link type of, thing, whether it's in the lobby or online. Some of this dynamic really plays out in that arena. So let's talk through that. What do you think happens to introverts and extroverts through some of these connection strategies, like a campaign strategy?
Yeah.
Who is that designed for?
At Saddleback Church, that's a huge channel, huge avenue for small group ministries is the campaign model. And I think, honestly, one of the great things about the campaign model is that it can reach both the extroverted and introvert. If I'm an introvert and I'm listening to this message from Pastor Rick and the kind of next step, the next spiritual step that's laid out for me is to join a group, like I believe that I can do
And then what has the next step play out? Do you do it online? Do you have to go meet someone in the lobby? Do you have to go call up someone?
Great question. So what I love about that is, and this is why I think it plays well to both extroverts and introverts, you have an option. If you're an extroverted person, you can go out onto the patio. You can talk to a small group pastor. You can have that face-to-face, one-on-one interaction, and you can sign up right then and there. Or you can, even before the message is over, go on your phone, sign up online, just using your smartphone, that kind of a thing. So it really kind of plays to either or.
That's good. It's a good strategy. Anything else you think for connections?
Yeah, I mean, I know we laughed about this earlier, but group link, when I hear about that, like that is an introvert nightmare.
Okay, let's explain what that is.
So, it's kind of the speed dating and you go in, it's room full of people and you're trying to figure out what group's right for you and you're talking to a bunch of different people trying to figure out what's your right spot. And like I said, I mean, small talk is painful for me.
Right.
And so, that is like my worst nightmare, especially if you're trying to get someone into an environment that I think introverts do really well in small groups, but you're introducing them through this
a large,
very different experience that's not going to
right.
reflect what they're going to have in the small group. So it takes a lot of energy to even convince yourself to do that as an introvert. And so I think we probably lose a lot of people through the cracks that way.
Yeah.
So having something where you can sign up online, having something where there's a one-on-one, someone that they can talk to or an email or whatever, that gives them another option, which is great.
Yeah. The other thing I've heard of is sometimes some churches will have all the available example, small group leaders, the new leaders, kind of line up in the lobby with their tables and take signups.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've only tried it once, and it just felt like, especially for the introverts, it was such exposure for them. They felt so vulnerable, and they're responsible for like a carnival, person calling for, "Hey, come join my group," and that's like so hard for them.
Right.
And you see them standing behind their table because they literally want to put a barrier between.
That's
them.
exactly right.
A physical barrier.
Yeah. So then you've got the extroverts out front, like, "Hey, come on!" and then you've got the introverts hiding with their notepad behind the table, and then at the end of the time, they're like, well, we couldn't sign up anyone. And then you've got the extrovert with that forum is designed for an extroverted personality.
Sure,
absolutely.
And so I think that kind of stacks it too.
Right.
So but on the flip side, okay, there's churches that do online signups almost predominantly with a list of existing groups or whatever. You never have to talk to the group leader. And then if you do that, sometimes that fit isn't there because they haven't actually had a conversation.
Absolutely.
And people don't show up in someone's living room and they've never laid eyes on them.
Right.
So it's just kind of something to be thinking about.
One thing that has helped me and something I try to do for my introverted leaders is even on a Sunday morning, I meet someone. Obviously, I'm at a smaller church, so you're able to do this a little bit more. But if I meet someone, if I personally introduce that person to this leader, there's a connection. I can do something for them. So it's not just that cold call kind of feel.
Right.
And they're, so it's still a person interaction. It still can be draining, but there is something a little better about that for introvert. It kind of gives them an
also,
open
you're
door.
a bridge.
Right.
So you've kind of helped them, ease them into the next step, which I think is really helpful.
So
And you've given your credibility. Well, we are almost out of time. So is there any final thoughts you'd like to share? Any resource I think is helpful for people?
One thing that I'm thinking of is, we're talking about extroverts, introverts, and ambiverts. Right?
Yes.
My encouragement to anyone out there listening would be to know who you are, love who you are, and be who you are.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Know who you are, love who you are, and be who you are. Especially talking within the context of extroverts versus introverts. Like, how has God designed me? I was just reading through 1 Corinthians, and I've got this wedding coming up. And 1 Corinthians, everyone knows 1 Corinthians 13, the chapter of love, right?
No, really?
Right?
Wedding? That's such a wild choice.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? That's a passage that you don't even have to be a believer. You know that passage. But the thing is, it is sandwiched in between chapter 12 and chapter 14, which is all about Christian leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, how do I be a leader? I need to lead with love. And we talked about self-awareness before. And if I can be self-aware enough to know how has God created me, accept how God's created me, be who God has created me, that if I can do those things first, then I'm going to be a great leader in the sense that I'm going to be able to, whether it's an introvert or whether it's an extrovert, really bridge that gap with love and lead that way. So that's
a great word. Yes. So don't envy how other people are.
Absolutely not. Yeah. There are some powerful introverted leaders, and likewise with extroverts as well. And I think it's just important to be who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I love that. And I think for me, it took a long time for me to feel comfortable saying that I was an introvert because I just had the messages so long that that's not what church leaders are. That's not what Christians are, at least not good ones. And so I think, just being comfortable in your own skin. But I think part of that too is knowing your boundaries, knowing your needs. I think especially for introverted leaders, you need to know how to take care of yourself because it's only when you take care of yourself that you can effectively minister to the people in your ministry. So just, don't do that unashamedly. Just, you have to be able to take care of yourself, whether that's, cutting out early to take a nap or just, scheduling after a conference a couple extra days so you can just, recharge. Just do that for yourself because
no one's going to do it for you, right?
Absolutely.
So you have to take the initiative there. Yeah.
That's so great words, you guys. Thank you. So thank you both for your comments and that you're on the spectrum. Not either or. God bless you and your ministry. You can follow Tom on Twitter at Kangster. It's Kangsta, along with his YouTube Manly Minute.
Yeah, the Manly Minute, no spaces, and Kangsta.
I'm sorry, I wasn't pronouncing it quite
Yeah,
right.
it's not gangster.
I'm showing my age. That's because I'm old.
No, it's Kangsta. K-A-N-G-S-T-A. Yeah.
So even if I can't pronounce it, you can find it. And Amy is on at Amy K. Jackson on Twitter. And of course, her smallgroups.com website. You can get resources there. They are also both graciously agreed to be on our Facebook group talk page. Basically, when this goes up, you'll be able to interact with either of them. You can push back on anything.
Yeah.
You can talk about whatever else manly minute things you want to talk about.
I just love the way Amy's is so professional and mine's gangsta. What's happening here?
And you guys are probably similar in age, which is really interesting.
That's
This is
awesome.
So,
I love it.
so you're welcome to ask them questions. They will make themselves available on the Small Group Network page. And I am so thankful that God uses both introverts, extroverts, and everything in between.
Amen.
So it's a great thing. So thank you for listening to Group Talk. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Here to There, part of the Group Talk network of podcasts. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.